And joining us now, Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons, of course, a key member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, we've just been talking about the resistance, especially among House Republicans, to President Zelensky's message and to the need for more aid, the $24 billion, and, of course, his plea for the long-range missiles, the so-called ATACMS. From your perspective, can it get through the Senate if you could overcome the objections from the House Republicans? And should House Democrats join in to try to get this thing through, including preventing a government shutdown?
Well, Andrea, the entire Senate just gathered to hear from President Zelensky in the old Senate chamber, a very intimate setting where there hasn't been an address from a head of state in more than 50 years. He made a very passionate, very compelling case for our continued sustained support of Ukraine's brave fight against Russian aggression. And both Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell and members of both the Democratic and Republican caucuses spoke in favor of this badly needed continued funding. A few simple points, if I could. Our 50 partners and allies in this effort have contributed more than we have. President Zelensky made it clear that if we were to stop our support, it would tragically, critically harm the Ukrainian war effort and encourage Putin. And it would weaken our allies around the world in their confidence about the United States being willing to stay the course. As you just said in your question, Andrea, it's a whole different matter in the House of Representatives, where Speaker McCarthy and some members of his caucus who are far to the right are listening to the siren song of former President Trump, who is questioning why this is our fight and why we should care. I think the bottom line is simple. Ukraine is on the front lines of freedom, and if we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, we will have to have engagement in fights with him elsewhere in the region. And if we don't stay the course in supporting Ukraine, we will simply encourage Xi Jinping and other autocrats around the world. It will be open season on wars around the world if we don't stay the course in Ukraine.
And I'm told that Senator Schumer said this publicly, that if they don't get the money, they lose the war. I see that Senator Cynthia Lummis, from Republican from Wyoming, Mike Rounds, Republican from South Dakota, all praised his performance. But, of course, you've got Rand Paul saying he's not going to vote for it. I also want to bring up something that I've been working on and that is becoming more and more apparent. I was on Morning Joe today with Secretary Blinken, and he confirmed what I was hearing and others are hearing about a very complicated three-way deal in the Middle East, where Saudi Arabia would get a defense agreement with the United States. They would also get civilian nuclear power, and with some limitations on the level of enrichment that they could do and how this would be contained. Israel would get recognition from Saudi Arabia, which, as the keeper of all of Islam and of the holy sites, would lead to all of the other Arab countries joining in. So basically, it would end the Israeli-Arab conflict with a land agreement of some undefined sort to the Palestinians. And presumably this would also be a bulwark against Iran by the Saudis, by the U.S., by Israel. Would this get through the Senate? It would have to get 67 votes.
Well, that's right, Andrea. An agreement like that, with that significance and that scope, would have to be reviewed and approved by the Senate. A number of us have been discussing this agreement and its possible details. It is still in the early stages of negotiation in recent days. A few core points here. One is that there has to be some significant provisions for the Palestinians, for the security of their position in the West Bank and investment in their future, something that makes a two-state solution a sustainable possibility into the future. There has to be active engagement by Israel in terms of ensuring that whatever nuclear technology is shared with the Saudis and whatever the arrangements are for security with the Saudis are also agreeable to the Israelis. There would have to be mutual recognition and deepening of security and economic ties between Israel, the Saudi kingdom, and the rest of the Arab world. That would be one of the real promising prospects of this. But, Andrea, it also raises real and serious questions given Saudi Arabia's human rights record, given the core values that seem to have animated the kingdom in recent decades. That's a topic of active and vigorous conversation here about how we would ensure that this would be a lasting and fundamental realignment of the Saudi kingdom and Israel towards democracy, towards the United States, and away from some of the recent both dalliance by the Saudi kingdom with China and with other global powers, their cooperation with Russia on energy policy, how we would ensure that there would be a movement towards more transparency and improved human rights record and away from their potential alternative engagement with China and Russia. So very complex deal. I have confidence in Secretary Blinken and President Biden in the choices they've made so far, but I'm very much looking forward to engaging in this debate and discussion here in the Senate as the negotiations move forward.
Very, very interesting. Of course, the timing would probably be the beginning of the year, but not too long into the new year because of the politics of it all, getting closer and closer to the election. But before I let you go, Senator, let me just ask you about this confirmation of the Secretary of the Army. Now, there are two, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of the Army, but that would leave probably 299 more high-ranking military officers and their families and all of the other issues, the potential staff, the other national security implications, and the morale for the troops and the officer corps still being held by Tommy Tuberville, one senator.
Andrea, Senator Tuberville is doing something that's unprecedented. Never before has an American senator held the promotion, not of one or two or three, but of hundreds of the entire cadre of flag rank officers, generals and admirals. I respect that he has a policy disagreement with President Biden. That's part of what we do here in the Senate. We have disagreements. But his path forward should be asking for and getting a vote on the Senate, up or down. He's been offered that in the past. One of the absolute foundations of our democracy is civilian control of a nonpartisan, non-political military. This is taking hundreds and hundreds of senior military officers and inserting them into the middle of a partisan dispute and holding up them and their families from being able to move to new posts, to new places of service in accordance with the promotion process. It's about 300 right now. Andrea, by the end of the year, it will grow to almost 600 senior officers. Senator Tuberville should abandon his hold, ask for and receive a vote on the floor of the Senate, and have an up and down vote on this policy disagreement. That's the right path. This has never happened before, and it should never happen again.
Senator Coons, thank you so much for all of that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.